Microcampus is a program where students are selected to go on a 28-day trip to study one specific topic in Xizhou, China. I first vaguely learned about this trip in 6th grade because one of my sisters was in 8th grade at the time. When 8th grade for me arrived, I decided to apply and got in. Microcampus is a trip that reveals your character and tests several skills that will be useful in the future. Microcampus also allows you to embrace the culture, which is why it is such an experiential trip. My inquiry project is on fishing. In order to investigate fishing in Xizhou, one must consider the techniques and equipment, the habits of a fisher, and the finance. The Guide to Being a Fisherman in Xizhou. These are only a few of the fish in Lake Erhai. Two types of fishing in Xizhou are cormorant fishing and net fishing. This is a picture of Mr. Yang and I. Mr. Yang was my main partner for cormorant fishing. Him and 4 other families run a tourist business. His family owns 20 cormorants, all of which are male except one. One of his cormorants is 8, while the rest are either 4 or 5. Mr. Yang was very generous to allow me to come to interview him anytime I requested. He has been a great help to me and has taught me a lot. After a cormorant is born, it has to be 65 to 100 days old in order to begin a 2-month training process. During that time span, Mr. Yang sends the cormorants to the water where they can get used to it. Fishing for cormorants comes naturally, so Mr. Yang only has to create signals to order them back. This is Mr. Yang using one of his signals to call one of his cormorants back. After they are fully trained, they are ready for showtime. Mr. Yang limits the amount of food they eat to make them more aggressive during the show. A cord is also tied around the neck of the cormorants so they do not swallow the fish. When the show is over, Mr. Yang feeds the male cormorants 500 grams of fish and 800 grams of fish for the female. A cormorant lives up to 28 to 30 years, but when they are about 13 years old, they become less active and cannot fish in deep waters. Mr. Lee and Miss Yang, fishers I interviewed, used 30 by 6 meter nets to fish. In total, they own 5 nets. To spread out these big nets, they dump one side of the net in the water and then paddle away from it to unroll the net until it is fully spread out. Since the small silver fish that they catch is tangled with the net after they fish, they use a whipping tool that they built themselves to separate the fish from the net. They also own a metal boat that they bought from a family in Xiaochun. Each boat lasts about 7 to 10 years, depending on the condition. There is also another type of net that is 12 meters in length. This rectangular net has many openings on all 4 sides of it. The opening gradually gets smaller, so once the fish enters it, it's harder for it to leave because this hole is small. This net is also dumped in the lake and retrieved later on. A rock is also attached to one end of the net to make it sink, and an empty plastic bottle on the other so the fishermen can locate the net later that day, or even the next. In this video above, you can see a lady fixing a small hole in a damaged net. Mr. Lee and his son sell fishing nets that they hand make. One net can be made in one day. The nets come in any size and are lined with weights so that the net sinks. I do not know the exact names of each net, but there is a thicker yellow net, a thin blue net, and a thin white net. The blue net is meant for smaller fish like Jiyu, while the white net is meant for bigger fish like Liyu and Saoyu. The nets last for about 2 to 3 months, but small holes and rips can be repaired by the fisher. With that being said, these nets can last for about 2 to 3 years when the fisher repairs it by themselves. Cormorant fishing has been in Mr. Yang's family for 3 generations. He has been training cormorants for 5 years. Mr. Yang worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. He has 4 to 5 shows per day, but when there are a lot of tourists, he has about 8 shows. The government does not allow people to fish in Lake Erhai with cormorants for their own business. But because Mr. Yang works for a tourist business, which is government owned, Mr. Yang and the 4 other families are allowed to fish in Lake Erhai with cormorants. Since they fish for themselves, they can be more flexible with their schedule. Mr. Lee and Miss Young wake up at 2 a.m. to put their nets in lake or high. Then either at 7 or 8 a.m. they go to pick up the nets. Next, they start their whipping process to separate the fish from the net. Finally, they gather the fish and go home to sell them to the salespeople. Another fisher, Mr. Lee, wakes up around 3 or 4 a.m. to put his net in the lake. Then he goes to retrieve his net at 7 a.m. Like most of the other fishers, he then goes to his house where he sells his fish to the salesman. When he does not have enough time to go to the market to buy food, his family sometimes just cooks and then eats the fish they catch. From January to September 28th, it is illegal for fishermen to fish because that is when the fish lay eggs. During that time, the government provides about 100 RMB for each person per month. Mr. Lee's family gets about 500 RMB per month. Mr. Lee says that the money he receives is not enough to support his family, so he goes to renovate houses to earn more money. Mr. Yang sells the fish he catches to the tourists for 50 RMB, no matter what the size of the fish is. Any remaining fish he sells in the market. The money he uses to buy fish to feed the cormorants is provided by the company. He buys about 10 kilograms of fish each day. The government also puts larger fish in the area the cormorants fish so that they can catch bigger fish for the tourists. Some of those fish are used to feed the birds as well. Mr. Yang makes about 3,000 RMB per month and does not have to pay for most of his materials because he works for a company. When fishing is illegal, fishers make about 2,000 RMB per month, including the money the government provides. When fishing is legal, they make about 3,000 RMB per month. 1 kilogram of fish costs about 30 RMB. Dead fish cost about 3 to 5 RMB less than fresh ones. Since these fishers do not work for a company, they have to pay for their own materials. A metal bow costs about 5,000 to 6,000 RMB. The blue nets cost about 80 or 90 RMB, and the white nets cost about 100 RMB. The cost varies sometimes depending on the size.